For centuries, one ancient text has hovered at the edge of biblical history, like a shadow deliberately erased. The Book of Enoch is not a minor legend or a late forgery, but a work once read, quoted, and trusted by early Jewish communities and the first generations of Christians. It tells a version of humanity's origins that is far more unsettling than the one most believers know today. In its pages, angels do not simply rebel in abstract terms. They descend, teach forbidden knowledge, alter human destiny, and trigger a catastrophe so severe that a global flood becomes a calculated act of survival rather than moral punishment. This is precisely why the Book of Enoch was excluded. Its detailed cosmology challenged developing theology, its explanation of demons disrupted emerging doctrine, and its message stripped religious institutions of exclusive control over divine knowledge. Too ancient to dismiss, too revealing to accept, it was pushed outside the canon and quietly buried. Before we dive deeper, ignite that like button and prepare for the revelations to come. Tell me in the comments where you are listening from what time it is there. And as always with our videos, the visuals are here to add context, but they aren't necessary to follow along. Thank you for always having our back. Prepare yourself and let's dive in. Some texts vanish because they are weak, others disappear because they are dangerous. The Book of Enoch belongs firmly to the second category. Long before church councils, long before an official Bible existed, this text circulated openly among Jewish communities as a serious theological work. Its oldest sections were written centuries before the birth of Jesus, placing it alongside many writings that later became foundational scripture. Copies were read, studied, and debated in a world where the boundaries of heaven, earth, and the unseen were not abstract ideas but lived realities. Enoch was not treated as folklore, it was treated as memory. What makes this survival remarkable is not only its age, but its authority. The Book of Enoch is explicitly quoted in the New Testament, in the Epistle of Jude, where a prophecy is attributed directly to Enoch himself. This single reference confirms that for early Christians, Enoch was not fringe material. It was considered a valid prophetic voice. At a time when Christian doctrine was still fluid, Enoch stood as a bridge between ancient Jewish mysticism and emerging Christian belief. Removing it later required more than scholarly disagreement. It required intentional silence. The reason becomes clear when examining what the text actually claims. Enoch does not offer symbolic language that can be safely reinterpreted. It names names, it describes structures, it lays out a cosmic order with the precision of a map. Heaven is not an ethereal concept, but a layered system. Punishment is not metaphorical, but geographic. Angels are not distant messengers, but administrators, teachers, and in some cases criminals. The universe of Enoch operates like a governed realm where laws can be broken and consequences enforced. This level of specificity was a problem. During the centuries when Jewish and Christian leaders were struggling to unify belief, Enoch's cosmology was too rigid to absorb. Different communities debated the fate of the soul after death, the nature of divine judgment, and the hierarchy of spiritual beings. Enoch offered answers that were not easily adjustable. It described distinct chambers for souls after death, separating the righteous from the unjust long before a final judgment. This contradicted developing theological models that preferred ambiguity, allowing doctrine to evolve gradually under institutional control. Even more disruptive was Enoch's explanation of evil. In later theology, demons are often portrayed as fallen angels or symbolic forces of temptation. Enoch refuses that simplicity. It presents evil as the lingering consequence of a prehistoric catastrophe. According to the text, angels known as watchers descended to earth, violated divine boundaries, and produced hybrid offspring with human women. These beings, the Nephilim, were not merely giants in stature, but engines of violence whose existence destabilized the world. When they were destroyed, their bodies died, but their spirits did not. Those disembodied spirits became the demons that now roam the earth. This explanation transforms evil from a moral abstraction into a historical aftermath. Accepting this narrative would have reshaped demonology entirely. Evil would no longer be explained primarily as personal failure or inherited sin, but as an external infestation rooted in ancient rebellion. Human suffering would be linked not only to free will, but to a legacy imposed by non-human actors. This raised uncomfortable questions. If demons are not fallen angels but the spirits of dead giants, then the story of creation, corruption, and redemption becomes far more complex than a single fall in Eden. The Book of Enoch also posed a direct challenge to religious authority through its treatment of knowledge. In the text, forbidden knowledge is not philosophical speculation. It is practical, dangerous, and transformative. The Watchers teach humanity metallurgy, weapon-making, astrology, enchantments, and cosmetic arts. These teachings accelerate human development but also magnify violence, vanity, and control. Knowledge itself is portrayed as morally neutral but catastrophically harmful when introduced prematurely. This theme undermines the idea that all enlightenment is inherently good and places responsibility on those who control access to information. Even time itself becomes a battleground. Enoch describes a solar calendar of 364 days, structured so that seasons and sacred observances fall in perfect order. This calendar is presented not as an option, but as the correct system ordained by cosmic law. Other calendars, particularly lunar systems used by religious elites, are described as corrupt distortions. In ancient societies, controlling the calendar meant controlling festivals, sacrifices, and communal rhythm. By proposing an alternative divinely revealed calendar, the Book of Enoch threatened the monopoly of priestly authority. It implied that cosmic truth could be accessed without temple mediation. This is why Enoch consistently empowers a single human figure with overwhelming insight. Enoch does not rely on institutions, lineages, or priesthoods. He walks with God directly. He is guided by angels. He sees what others are forbidden to see. His authority does not come from position, but from proximity. This model of revelation is inherently destabilizing. It suggests that divine knowledge can bypass established hierarchies entirely. As religious institutions grew more structured, this kind of narrative became unacceptable. The canon required texts that reinforced stability, obedience, and manageable doctrine. Enoch offered none of that. It presented a universe where rebellion had already occurred at the highest levels, where contamination of creation required near-total destruction, and where remnants of that disaster still actively influence human life. It refused to sanitize the past. When church councils eventually formalized the biblical canon, the Book of Enoch was excluded not because it was unknown, but because it was too well known. Its ideas were too influential to be harmless, yet too difficult to reconcile with emerging orthodoxy. Declaring it apocryphal allowed leaders to distance themselves from its implications without having to refute its claims line by line. Silence was safer than debate. Yet the text never truly disappeared. It survived in isolation, preserved by communities that never accepted its exclusion. Centuries later, its rediscovery would confirm what its critics feared most. The Book of Enoch was not a medieval invention or a fringe fantasy. It was ancient, consistent, and deeply embedded in early religious thought. Its removal was not the result of error, but of choice. What remains is a question that lingers beneath every surviving fragment and quotation. If this text was once trusted, quoted, and revered, what does its absence say about the version of history that replaced it? The Book of Enoch does not merely add details to familiar stories, it reframes the entire origin of corruption, evil, and divine intervention. And once that frame is restored, the flood, the demons, and the silence surrounding them begin to look far less accidental. Among all the names listed in the long genealogies before the flood, one figure breaks the rhythm of death so abruptly that it feels like a rupture in reality itself. Generation after generation follows the same grim formula: lived, fathered, died. The cadence is relentless, like a drumbeat reinforcing the cost of exile from Eden. Adam dies, Seth dies, Methuselah, despite his legendary lifespan, dies. Mortality is the rule, unchallenged and absolute. Then the pattern collapses. Enoch does not die, he vanishes. The text in Genesis is deceptively brief, almost evasive. It does not describe illness, age, or burial. It simply states that Enoch walked with God, and then he was no more, because God took him. In ancient storytelling, such silence is never accidental. When a narrative refuses to explain, it signals that something immense has been compressed into a single line. That single sentence became the doorway through which entire cosmologies later poured. In the symbolic language of the ancient world, numbers carried weight. Enoch is the 7th generation from Adam, a position loaded with meaning. 7 represented completion, sacred order, and alignment with divine cycles. Creation itself culminated on the 7th day. To place Enoch at this point in the lineage was to mark him as the culmination of a phase of humanity. He was not merely another patriarch, he was the hinge between eras. The phrase "walked with God" must also be understood in its original cultural context. And this was not a poetic expression for good behavior or quiet devotion. In ancient Near Eastern literature, to walk with a deity implied access, proximity, and shared movement. Kings walked with gods in myths when they were granted secret knowledge. Priests walked with gods when they were initiated into hidden rituals. For Enoch, this walking suggests an intimacy that crossed ordinary human limits. It implies instruction, not admiration. Participation, not obedience alone. This is where the Book of Enoch expands what Genesis leaves deliberately vague. According to the text, Enoch's relationship with the divine was not abstract or emotional, it was experiential. Angels did not merely appear to him, they escorted him. He was shown places no living human was meant to see. These journeys were not symbolic visions, but structured traversals through cosmic regions governed by laws, hierarchies, and consequences. Angels in Enoch's world are not decorative messengers, they function more like administrators of reality. Each has a role tied to specific forces: light, fire, wind, time, judgment. One angel, Uriel, becomes Enoch's primary guide. His name, often interpreted as Light of God, reflects his function. He explains rather than commands. He does not demand worship. He teaches. Through Uriel, Enoch learns that the universe is not chaotic, but regulated, and that rebellion against its structure carries measurable consequences. Enoch is taken through layers of the heavens, each more severe and ordered than the last. He sees storehouses of natural forces described with almost mechanical precision. Winds are released according to schedule. Stars follow prescribed paths and are punished when they deviate. This may sound mythological to modern ears, but for ancient audiences it functioned as cosmology. It was an attempt to explain why the world behaved with both regularity and sudden catastrophe. The most disturbing revelation, however, is not the order of the cosmos, but its scars. Enoch is shown the place where certain angels are confined. These are not abstract villains, they are former watchers, beings originally tasked with observing humanity. Their role was guardianship, not interference. Yet they crossed a boundary that Enoch's universe treats as inviolable, the separation between spiritual beings and biological creation. Their punishment is not delayed moral judgment, but immediate spatial confinement. They are bound beneath the earth, imprisoned in regions defined by darkness, heat, and isolation. This concept matters because it reframes divine justice. Punishment is not postponed until the end of time. It is enacted within history, embedded into the structure of reality itself. Sin leaves geological traces. Enoch's unique fate is inseparable from this role as witness. He does not ascend because he is morally superior in a vague sense. He ascends because he is needed as a recorder. His survival is functional. He is preserved to testify. In this framework, immortality is not a reward but an assignment. He becomes the human reference point for events that would otherwise belong exclusively to angels. This also explains why Enoch's authority was so unsettling to later institutions. He is not part of a priesthood. He offers no sacrifices. He builds no temples. His knowledge does not flow through ritual channels. It comes directly from proximity to cosmic truth. If such a figure is legitimate, then divine authority cannot be fully monopolized by institutions. Revelation becomes personal, unpredictable, and uncontrollable. The comparison with Elijah, another figure taken without dying, reinforces this pattern. Both are removed from the normal human endpoint. Both become symbols of uninterrupted access to the divine. Both return in later traditions as end-time witnesses. These figures destabilize linear history. They imply that time itself can be bent when cosmic necessity demands it. For ancient readers, Enoch's ascension was not escapism, it was a warning. If a human could be taken alive into the machinery of heaven, then humanity was far closer to cosmic conflict than comfortable theology allowed. The boundary between heaven and earth was not sealed. It had already been breached, and not only by angels descending, but by a man ascending. This reframes the flood narrative that follows. The destruction of the world is no longer an emotional overreaction by a disappointed deity. It becomes a response informed by reconnaissance. Enoch has seen the damage. He has observed the imprisoned watchers. He understands the contamination spreading through creation. The flood emerges as an intervention grounded in intelligence, not impulse. By surviving beyond death, Enoch becomes something unprecedented, a human anchor point in a cosmic war. His writings claim authority not because they are inspired feelings, but because they are field reports. He is not speculating about heaven, he has been there. And once that claim is taken seriously, the entire pre-flood world transforms from myth into a suppressed chapter of human history. This is why Enoch could not remain safely inside the canon. A man who walked with God, saw angels punished, mapped the afterlife, and escaped death entirely, was too disruptive to domesticate. His story demanded consequences, and those consequences would ripple outward, threatening every simplified explanation that followed. The catastrophe that reshaped the ancient world did not begin with chaos, it began with organization. The Book of Enoch insists on this point with uncomfortable clarity. The fall of the Watchers was not a spontaneous outbreak of desire or a handful of isolated mistakes. It was a coordinated decision made by beings who understood exactly what they were risking. This detail alone changes everything. Evil in this narrative is not ignorance. It is informed defiance. The Watchers were assigned observers, guardians meant to oversee humanity without interfering in its biological or spiritual development. Their role was surveillance, not participation. In modern terms, they functioned like cosmic auditors, monitoring a fragile system still in its early stages. But observation turned into fascination, and fascination hardened into intent. They saw human women not as symbolic figures, but as physical beings capable of reproduction, intimacy, and legacy. That realization ignited a crisis among them. One watcher, named Shemihaza, emerges as the central figure in this descent. His name suggests perception or vision, fitting for a being whose failure begins with seeing too much and wanting control over what he saw. Unlike later portrayals of rebellion that emphasize arrogance alone, Shemihaza is described as conflicted. He fears the consequences. He understands the gravity of crossing realms. His hesitation reveals that the Watchers were not ignorant of divine law. They were fully aware that their actions would trigger irreversible punishment. This awareness leads to the most damning moment in the narrative, the oath. Rather than retreating, Shemihaza proposes a pact. If they are going to descend, they will descend together. No one will back out. No one will escape blame. The Watchers swear a mutual curse upon themselves, binding each other to the same fate. In ancient cultures, oaths were not symbolic promises. They were metaphysical contracts believed to alter reality itself. To swear an oath was to invoke consequence as an active force. The location of this oath is just as significant as the act. They descend upon Mount Hermon, a place whose name is associated with devotion and sacred separation. In other traditions, mountains serve as meeting points between heaven and earth, places where divine presence is most accessible. By choosing this site, the Watchers invert its meaning. A mountain meant for consecration becomes the staging ground for rebellion. Sacred geography is corrupted before humanity even realizes what is happening. Once the oath is sealed, the descent accelerates. The Watchers do not arrive as fleeting apparitions. They take on form, interact physically, and integrate themselves into human society. Their unions with human women produce offspring unlike anything the world had seen. These children, later called Nephilim, are not simply tall humans. They are hybrids, carrying both biological flesh and a distorted echo of celestial essence. Their existence is itself an act of defiance against the structure of creation. But reproduction is only part of the damage. The Watchers also begin to teach. This is where the narrative becomes particularly unsettling, because the knowledge they introduce is not purely destructive, it is advanced. It accelerates civilization. They teach humans how to shape metal, how to refine tools, how to read the sky. These are not random skills, they are foundational technologies that define dominance, warfare, and social hierarchy. One watcher, Asael, becomes infamous for the depth of corruption he introduces. He teaches humans how to forge weapons, transforming conflict from personal violence into organized warfare. The shift is subtle but catastrophic. With weapons comes scale, with scale comes slaughter. Violence becomes efficient. The earth fills with blood, not because humans suddenly become evil, but because they are suddenly capable of far greater harm. Asael also introduces cosmetic arts, ornamentation, and the manipulation of appearance. At first glance, this seems trivial compared to weapons, but the text treats it with equal severity. Altering appearance fosters vanity, deception, and social imbalance. Desire becomes manufactured. Attraction becomes manipulated. Human relationships are distorted at a psychological level. Corruption is no longer only external, it becomes internalized. Other watchers teach enchantments, astrology, and forms of divination. These practices are not condemned because they involve curiosity, but because they attempt to extract power from the cosmos without understanding its cost. Humans begin to believe they can control outcomes, predict fate, and bypass moral consequence. Authority shifts from ethical conduct to technical skill. Those with knowledge gain power over those without it. As the Nephilim grow, the consequences of this interference spiral beyond control. Their size is described in exaggerated terms, not to provide anatomical measurements, but to convey scale and imbalance. They consume resources at an unsustainable rate. Agriculture collapses under the demand. When food runs out, they turn on animals. When animals vanish, they turn on humans. Cannibalism is not presented as metaphor. It is described as the final stage of a broken ecosystem. The earth itself is portrayed as reacting to this violence. Blood saturates the ground. Order collapses. The language used suggests that creation was never designed to sustain such beings. The presence of the Nephilim is treated like a biological contamination, a virus introduced into a closed system. The planet begins to fail under the strain. This is the moment when the narrative shifts from tragedy to inevitability. The flood is no longer a surprise. It becomes the only remaining option. Humanity is not simply sinful. It is trapped between predatory giants and knowledge it cannot responsibly wield. The Watchers, having introduced the corruption, cannot undo it. Their rebellion has escaped their control. What makes this episode so dangerous for later theology is its implications. Evil is not framed as a purely human failure. It is imposed. Humanity inherits consequences it did not initiate. This complicates ideas of blame, judgment, and justice. If humans were corrupted by superior beings, then moral responsibility becomes shared across realms. The Watchers are not portrayed as monsters from the beginning. They fall because they desire participation, influence, legacy. Their crime is not hatred of humanity, but obsession with it. They want to shape it, accelerate it, redefine it. In doing so, they fracture the boundary that made life stable. This is the story that Orthodox theology could not comfortably absorb. It portrays angels as fallible administrators, knowledge as morally dangerous, and history as the aftermath of a cosmic breach. It leaves no room for clean origins or simple villains. And once this framework is accepted, the silence that followed its exclusion begins to make sense. When the giants finally fell, the catastrophe did not end. The flood erased their bodies, crushed their cities, and wiped their presence from the surface of the earth, But according to the Book of Enoch, destruction of flesh was only half the operation. What remained was far more insidious. The death of the Nephilim did not result in silence. It produced something new, something restless, something that would linger long after the waters receded. This is where Enoch's narrative diverges most sharply from later religious explanations of evil. The Nephilim were not ordinary creatures. Their bodies were formed from human flesh, but their inner essence was inherited from the Watchers, beings whose nature was not mortal. When the flood destroyed the physical world, it did not annihilate everything equally. Human bodies died, and their spirits followed a path reserved for human souls. The Nephilim, however, were neither fully human nor fully angelic. Their death created a fracture in the cosmic order. Their bodies dissolved, but their spirits could not. This anomaly is the foundation of Enoch's explanation for demons. In this framework, demons are not fallen angels. They are the disembodied spirits of dead giants trapped in the world they once dominated. They cannot ascend to the heavens because their origin is corrupted. They cannot fully perish because the spiritual component inherited from the Watchers is not subject to natural death. They are suspended between realms, condemned to wander. The text describes these spirits as active, hostile, and deeply tormented. Their torment is not symbolic. It is hunger. In life, the Nephilim consumed endlessly. Their appetites were colossal, driven by bodies that required constant intake. In death, that appetite remains, but the body is gone. The result is a craving without satisfaction. This hunger drives their behavior. They seek attachment, influence, and possession as substitutes for physical consumption. This redefinition of demons radically alters the moral landscape. Evil is no longer merely temptation whispered by abstract forces. It becomes pressure applied by entities driven by unresolved deprivation. These spirits are not inventing cruelty, they are continuing it. The violence they once enacted physically is now expressed psychologically, socially, and spiritually. Where they cannot devour flesh, they consume stability. Enoch's text explains that these spirits afflict humanity in specific ways. They provoke conflict, spread illness, distort desire, and incite chaos. This is not portrayed as random malice, but as continuation of their original nature. The giants once disrupted ecosystems through consumption. As spirits, they disrupt societies through influence. Their goal is not strategy or long-term rule, it is temporary relief from torment. This view also clarifies why the punishment of the Watchers and the fate of their offspring are treated differently. The Watchers are bound, imprisoned in dark regions beneath the earth, awaiting final judgment. They are restrained because their power is too great to remain active. The spirits of the Nephilim, by contrast, are not bound. Their punishment is freedom without form. They roam without rest, without resolution, without hope of redemption. In practical terms, this creates a world permanently scarred by a pre-flood disaster. The flood cleansed the earth of hybrid flesh, but it could not cleanse the atmosphere of consequence. Evil becomes a residue rather than a rebellion in progress. Humanity inherits a haunted environment, one in which ancient violence still echoes through unseen channels. This concept influenced early Jewish and Christian thought far more than later theology admits. Ideas of possession, spiritual affliction, and invisible oppression make far more sense within this framework. The fear was not simply of sin, but of invasion. Human beings were seen as vulnerable not only because of moral weakness, but because they existed in a world saturated with hostile remnants of an ancient war. This also explains the urgency of moral instruction in Enoch's warnings. Righteous behavior is not only about obedience, it is defensive. Justice, restraint, and humility are presented as forms of protection. A disciplined life limits access. Chaos invites intrusion. The ethical system becomes a survival strategy in a contaminated world. One of the most unsettling implications of this doctrine is its permanence. The spirits of the Nephilim are not destroyed at the flood. They are allowed to remain until the final judgment. This means the ancient catastrophe is not a closed chapter. It is an ongoing condition. Every generation lives in the aftermath of that initial breach. History does not reset. It accumulates damage. This perspective reframes human suffering in a way that later theology struggled to accommodate. Not all pain is deserved. Not all temptation originates internally. Some forces act upon humanity because they are compelled by their own unresolved destruction. This does not absolve humans of responsibility, but it complicates simplistic narratives of blame. The presence of these spirits also reinforces the importance of boundaries in Enoch's worldview. The original sin of the Watchers was boundary violation. The ongoing harm caused by their offspring spirits is boundary erosion. They seek entry. They exploit weakness. They infiltrate where distinctions collapse. Order is the enemy. Structure repels them. This is why Enoch emphasizes cosmic law so heavily. Law is not arbitrary, it is protective architecture. Later, religious systems found this explanation uncomfortable. It suggested that evil had a historical cause external to humanity, and that the world itself was structurally compromised. Such a worldview leaves little room for neat moral accounting. It demands humility in judgment and vigilance in conduct. It also diminishes the centrality of institutional mediation, placing responsibility directly on individual alignment with order. By redefining demons as the spirits of giants, the Book of Enoch strips evil of mystery while intensifying its horror. These are not symbolic shadows, they are the psychological debris of a biological disaster. They are ancient, personal, and persistent. They remember what it was like to dominate the earth, and they resent their loss. This is why the text treats the flood as a partial solution. It halted physical extinction but left spiritual consequences unresolved. The final judgment is portrayed as the only event capable of closing the wound completely. Until then, humanity lives in contested space, sharing its world with remnants that should never have existed. This understanding transforms the pre-flood narrative into the foundation of a cosmic problem that extends into the present. Evil is not an abstract principle, it is an inheritance. And once this idea is absorbed, the silence surrounding the Book of Enoch begins to feel less like neglect and more like deliberate avoidance. With the giants erased and their spirits unleashed, the flood itself demands re-examination. In most familiar tellings, the deluge is framed as moral outrage, a divine reaction to human wickedness expressed through violence and corruption. The Book of Enoch strips away that simplicity. What unfolds instead is something colder, more calculated, and far more unsettling. The flood becomes an act of containment. It is not punishment first, it is remediation. According to Enoch's framework, the earth before the flood was not merely sinful, it was compromised at a structural level. Hybrid beings walked openly among humans. Knowledge meant for controlled cosmic systems had been injected into an immature civilization. Violence was no longer a byproduct of human choice, but a biological inevitability driven by creatures that consumed beyond sustainability. The planet was failing under an alien load. Left unchecked, extinction was not a possibility. It was guaranteed. This is why the narrative emphasizes that the earth itself cried out. This is not poetic exaggeration. In ancient cosmology, land was considered a living system capable of bearing witness. Blood spilled onto soil was believed to stain it, altering its spiritual condition. The violence of the Nephilim saturated the ground. The corruption reached animals, birds, and even fish, indicating a collapse of natural order across ecosystems. Creation was unraveling from the inside. The decision to initiate the flood follows a sequence of reconnaissance and judgment. Angels observe, reports are delivered. Enoch himself acts as a witness to both the crime and the sentence. This establishes a legal structure to the catastrophe. The flood is not impulsive, it is authorized, it follows cosmic protocol. Even divine intervention in this worldview operates within law. Central to this operation is the figure of Noah. His importance goes beyond personal righteousness. The text emphasizes that Noah is uncorrupted in his generations. This phrase carries biological weight. It implies genetic integrity, not merely moral virtue. In a world where hybridization had occurred, the survival of an unaltered human lineage becomes essential. Noah represents continuity, the preservation of the original human design. The ark itself functions as more than a vessel of survival. It is a quarantine chamber. By isolating Noah, his family, and select animals, the operation ensures that what emerges after the flood is uncontaminated. The waters do not discriminate emotionally. They sterilize comprehensively. The objective is not to teach a lesson, but to reset conditions necessary for life to continue. This reframing also explains the scale of destruction. A localized disaster would not suffice. The Nephilim were widespread. Their influence permeated societies. Their consumption disrupted entire regions. Partial measures would leave remnants capable of regenerating the problem. Total immersion was the only solution capable of reaching every contaminated zone simultaneously. The flood also serves as the final act of judgment against the Nephilim themselves. They are not imprisoned like the Watchers because their bodies are the problem. Physical annihilation is the only viable response. Yet even this solution carries limitations, as their spirits remain. The flood ends one phase of the crisis, but inaugurates another. The Watchers, meanwhile, receive a different sentence. Because they are immortal beings, they cannot be destroyed through natural means. Their punishment must match their nature. They are bound, restrained, and removed from influence. Their confinement beneath the earth is not symbolic. It represents removal from operational space. They no longer observe, they no longer teach, they no longer interfere. This division of punishment reveals a layered justice system. Flesh is destroyed, spirit is restrained, influence is limited. The universe responds proportionally to the nature of each offender. Such precision undermines later portrayals of divine wrath as indiscriminate. In Enoch's account, intervention is targeted and strategic. After the flood, the world is quieter but not healed. The absence of giants does not restore innocence. Humanity retains the knowledge introduced by the Watchers. Weapons exist. Social hierarchies persist. The scars of pre-flood corruption remain embedded in culture. What has changed is scale. The most destabilizing actors are gone, but their legacy remains. This is why Enoch's warnings continue beyond the flood narrative. The post-flood world is not safe by default, it is merely survivable. Humans must now navigate a reality shaped by ancient interference. The responsibility shifts. Where once corruption was imposed physically, it now operates subtly through memory, tradition, and lingering spiritual pressure. The flood, then, marks a transition rather than a conclusion. It closes the era of open hybridization, but opens the age of invisible struggle. Humanity is no longer preyed upon by towering giants, but influenced by unseen forces born from their destruction. The battlefield changes, but the conflict does not end. This understanding also explains the urgency of covenant in the post-flood world. Boundaries must be re-established. Distinctions must be reinforced. Dietary laws, moral codes, and social restrictions serve a new purpose. They are not arbitrary commands. They are safeguards designed to prevent another collapse. Order is no longer assumed. It must be maintained. By interpreting the flood as a containment event, the Book of Enoch reframes divine justice as preservation-focused rather than punitive. The objective is to save what can still be saved, even at catastrophic cost. Life is valued, but purity of structure is essential for life to persist. Corruption cannot be negotiated with, it must be removed. This perspective leaves little room for sentimental readings of the flood story. It is not a tale meant to comfort. It is a warning etched into geological memory. Civilization itself stands on the aftermath of a failed experiment involving forbidden knowledge, broken boundaries, and unchecked ambition. And once the flood is understood as a necessary intervention rather than moral theatre, the larger narrative comes into focus. Humanity survives not because it was innocent, but because it was salvageable. The world that emerges is not redeemed, it is stabilized. The final resolution is still pending, deferred to a future judgment capable of addressing what water could not erase. The silence surrounding this interpretation is telling. A flood as surgery rather than sermon reshapes responsibility, guilt, and hope. It transforms ancient history into an unfinished crisis. And it forces a confrontation with a reality many traditions prefer not to acknowledge. The greatest threats to humanity did not come from below, but from above. After the flood stabilized the physical world, the Book of Enoch shifts attention away from water and destruction towards something far more enduring, the architecture of the afterlife. This is where the text becomes unmistakably unsettling, because it refuses to treat death as an abstract transition. Instead, it describes a system already in operation, a structured holding environment where souls are sorted, restrained, and prepared long before any final judgment occurs. In Enoch's worldview, death is not an end point but a relocation. The soul does not dissolve, sleep, or vanish into mystery. It is transferred into a designated space with specific conditions. This space is commonly referred to as Sheol, but Enoch does not treat it as a single, undifferentiated realm. It is divided, compartmentalized, governed. Justice begins immediately, not at the end of time. Enoch is shown this realm during his guided journeys through the cosmos. What he sees is not a fiery hell or a blissful heaven, but a subterranean system carved into the foundations of the earth itself. Mountains, valleys, and hollow chambers form a holding structure for the dead. These are not symbolic images, they are described as locations with boundaries, atmospheres, and functions. 4 primary chambers are revealed, Each exists for a distinct category of soul. The separation is not arbitrary, it is based on the condition and fate of each individual during life. The afterlife in this system is not a moral reset, it is an extension of consequence. The first chamber is reserved for the righteous. It is described as a place of brightness, watered by a living spring. Souls here experience peace and relief. There is no torment, no fear, no isolation. They are aware that justice is coming, but they wait without anxiety. This chamber functions as reassurance. It confirms that integrity in life produces stability after death. Another chamber holds those who suffered injustice. These are souls who were murdered or oppressed and never received accountability in the world of the living. Their defining feature is not wickedness, but unresolved harm. They are conscious, vocal, and restless. Their presence introduces a crucial idea. Justice delayed is not justice denied. Their cries are not ignored. They are recorded. A third chamber contains the openly corrupt and violent, those who lived without restraint and inflicted suffering willingly. This space is darker, harsher, and marked by anticipation of punishment. Their condition is not yet final, but it is already oppressive. The future judgment is not a surprise to them. They expect it. The final chamber holds those who rejected moral order entirely. This is the most severe holding area. Souls here experience confinement without comfort. There is no hope of reversal. Their fate is already sealed, even if the sentence has not yet been publicly executed. The afterlife, in this sense, functions like a legal system where verdicts are known before sentencing is carried out. What matters most in this structure is timing. Judgment is not postponed until the end of history. It begins at death. The final judgment, when it arrives, is not about deciding innocence or guilt. That determination has already been made. The final event is about execution, not evaluation. This framework stands in sharp contrast to later theological models that collapse the afterlife into vague waiting or symbolic sleep. Enoch presents a moral universe that is actively managed. Souls are not lost, they are stored, observed, and categorized. Accountability is immediate. This also explains why Enoch's cosmology posed such a problem for emerging doctrine. If justice begins at death, institutional authority over salvation becomes limited. Moral alignment matters more than affiliation. Ritual participation cannot override conduct. Knowledge of cosmic order carries weight equal to belief. The afterlife is not the only domain Enoch explores. He is also shown the place of confinement for celestial beings. This region is distinct from Sheol. It is not designed for human souls. It is engineered specifically for angels who violated cosmic law. The Watchers are imprisoned here, bound in darkness beneath the earth. The separation between human and angelic punishment is critical. Humans are judged within a system that allows for relief, rest, or anticipation. Fallen angels receive no such structure. Their confinement is absolute. They are not sorted, they are restrained. Their awareness of guilt is constant. Their punishment is not educational, it is preventative. This distinction reinforces the severity of their crime. Angels possess knowledge, longevity, and proximity to divine order. Their violation was not impulsive, it was calculated. As a result, their punishment reflects their capacity for harm. They are removed from participation entirely. Enoch's exposure to these realms positions him as more than a prophet. He becomes a courier between worlds. His testimony is not interpretive. It is observational. He does not speculate about what happens after death. He reports what already exists. This has significant implications for how life is lived. In Enoch's worldview, behavior is not weighed against social norms or temporary outcomes. It is measured against a permanent cosmic structure. Choices echo beyond the body. There is no neutral ground. The presence of these holding chambers also reframes suffering. Those who endure injustice without resolution are not forgotten. Their pain does not vanish into silence. It accumulates testimony. The universe remembers. This idea offered profound reassurance to ancient communities living under oppression. Power was temporary. Accountability was inevitable. At the same time, this system leaves no room for moral complacency. Waiting for future redemption is not enough. Alignment with order must be active. The afterlife does not erase failure, it preserves it. This is why Enoch's revelations were so destabilizing. They bypassed abstraction and replaced it with infrastructure. Heaven, earth, and the underworld became interconnected components of a single system. There was no escape from consequence, only movement through its stages. By mapping the afterlife in such concrete terms, the Book of Enoch removes uncertainty as a moral cushion. Death does not pause judgment, it accelerates it. And once that idea takes hold, the silence imposed on this text becomes easier to understand. A universe where justice is immediate leaves little room for delay, negotiation, or denial. The journey Enoch records does not comfort the reader, it orients them. Life becomes preparation, not speculation. The afterlife is not a mystery waiting to be revealed. It is already operating unseen beneath the surface of the world, enforcing a law older than humanity itself. Beyond the chambers prepared for human souls, Enoch is taken to a place that does not exist for mankind at all. This region is not designed for correction, reflection, or waiting. It is a containment zone built for beings whose very presence destabilizes creation. What Enoch sees here is not metaphor, allegory, or moral lesson. It is infrastructure for eternal restraint. The terrain itself is hostile. He describes a vast, desolate valley carved deep into the foundations of the world, a place where light behaves unnaturally. Fire burns without illumination. Darkness persists despite flame. So the air feels heavy, oppressive, as if movement itself is resisted. This is not a realm of chaos, but of controlled suffering. Every element is calibrated to confine, weaken, and isolate. This is where the watchers are held. Unlike the wandering spirits of the Nephilim, their fathers are not free. Their punishment is immobility. They are bound beneath mountains, sealed away from the surface world, restrained until a future judgment that has already been decided. Their imprisonment is not temporary in any meaningful sense. Time here does not function as it does for humans. Waiting becomes its own torment. What distinguishes this place from human realms of punishment is purpose. Sheol exists to separate souls according to justice. This valley exists to neutralize threat. The watchers are not being taught a lesson, they are being removed from circulation. Their knowledge, influence, and capacity for interference are considered too dangerous to permit any contact with the living world. The language used to describe their bonds is precise. They are chained, not metaphorically, but functionally. Restraint is applied to their essence. Their former abilities are suppressed. Sight, movement, and authority are stripped away. What remains is awareness. They remember what they were. They remember what they did. They are forced to observe the consequences of their rebellion without the ability to intervene. This aspect of the punishment is critical. The Watchers are not annihilated because destruction would not address the nature of their crime. Their sin was not existence, but misuse of position. They violated trust, authority, and boundary. Their continued existence in confinement serves as testimony. They become monuments to transgression, preserved as evidence. Enoch is shown this place not for spectacle, but for verification. He is meant to see that justice has already been enacted at the highest level. There is no ongoing celestial war, no uncertainty about the outcome. The rebellion failed. The leaders are imprisoned. The system has responded. This directly contradicts later narratives that portray evil as an ongoing contest between equal forces. In Enoch's account, the outcome is settled. What remains is aftermath. The world is not threatened by the return of the Watchers. It is threatened by what they left behind. The valley itself reinforces this message. It is located beneath the earth, not beyond it. The implication is unsettling. The prison of fallen angels exists below human feet. The planet is layered. Beneath the soil where humans build and bury lies a deeper structure designed to hold ancient offenders. The earth is not just habitat, it is containment. This idea reshapes the concept of hell entirely. Hell is not merely a destination for sinners after death. It is an active component of cosmic security. It is a holding facility for beings whose power exceeded their loyalty. Fire, darkness, and isolation are tools, not symbols. The intensity of the environment reflects proportional justice. The Watchers descended from a position of proximity to divine order. Their fall is correspondingly deep. Those who rise highest fall furthest. Their punishment is not just severe, but absolute. What makes this vision especially disruptive is its implication for divine authority. There is no hesitation, no bargaining, no delay. Once the Watchers crossed the boundary, their fate was sealed. Mercy, in this context, does not mean exemption from consequence. It means preventing further harm. Justice here is preventative, not rehabilitative. This creates a sharp contrast with human judgment. Humans are given space to change, repent, and grow. Angels are not. Their knowledge eliminates excuse. Their punishment reflects that difference. The universe, in Enoch's telling, is not egalitarian. Responsibility scales with capacity. The existence of this prison also reframes the silence of the heavens. If the greatest rebellion has already been contained, then divine absence is not weakness, it is confidence. Order has been restored at the highest level. What unfolds on earth does so within boundaries already enforced. This realization would have been deeply unsettling to ancient audiences. It suggests that humanity is not living in the middle of a cosmic battle, but in the aftermath of one. The war has been fought. The damage remains. Enoch's testimony serves as confirmation that the system holds. Fallen angels are not roaming freely. They are not whispering into the ears of kings. They are bound, immobilized, and silenced. The influence humanity experiences comes from residual contamination, not active command. This distinction matters because it redirects responsibility. Humans cannot blame ongoing evil on powerful celestial overlords directing events from the shadows. The Watchers are neutralized. What persists is the echo of their interference, distorted knowledge, corrupted structures, and disembodied spirits born of a biological catastrophe. By revealing the prison of the Watchers, Enoch removes ambiguity from the cosmic hierarchy. Authority is centralized. Rebellion has limits. No being, regardless of origin, escapes consequence. This vision also serves as a warning. Boundaries are not suggestions, they are structural necessities. When crossed, the response is not negotiation, but removal. Creation is protected through containment. The fact that such a place exists beneath the surface of the world adds a layer of gravity to everyday life. Human civilization unfolds above a sealed wound. The ground itself holds memory. What was buried was not forgotten. It was locked away. This is why the Book of Enoch refuses comfort. It does not promise that the universe bends toward ease. It promises order. Order enforced through mechanisms older and harsher than human imagination prefers. The Valley of Confinement stands as a permanent reminder that rebellion against cosmic structure is not romantic, not liberating, and not temporary. It is final. And once that reality is acknowledged, the ancient fear embedded in this text becomes clear. Humanity lives on stabilized ground, not healed ground. The watchers are gone, but the scar remains, sealed beneath the earth, waiting for a judgment that will close the system completely. Once the fate of the watchers is sealed beneath the earth, the Book of Enoch pivots toward something that at first appears less dramatic, but is just as subversive, the structure of time itself. What Enoch is shown next is not a battlefield or a prison, but a mechanism. Time, in this cosmology, is not abstract. It is engineered, regulated, and guarded, and whoever controls it controls order. Enoch is guided through the paths of the heavens by Uriel, whose role as teacher becomes central here. Uriel does not speak in riddles or parables, he explains systems. The sun and moon are not wandering lights. They move through fixed gates embedded in the horizon, entering and exiting the world according to a schedule that never deviates. These gates are not symbolic doorways, they are structural points in the cosmos, invisible to human sight but foundational to reality. There are 6 gates in the east and 6 in the west. Through these, the sun rises and sets, shifting gradually across the year. When it emerges through the northern gate, days grow longer. When it moves toward the southern gates, daylight shortens. This motion explains the seasons with mechanical precision. Summer and winter are not moods of nature, they are outcomes of regulated movement. The moon follows a related but distinct path, governed by its own cycles and responsibilities. It is not merely a reflector of light, but a timekeeper, marking months and coordinating with the sun to maintain balance. When the moon deviates from its appointed course, it is described as being punished, a detail that reveals how seriously cosmic order is treated. Even celestial bodies are accountable. This worldview reframes astronomy as governance. The heavens operate like an administration. Angels oversee movements. Paths are enforced. Deviations are corrected. Nothing is left to chance. For ancient audiences, this was not superstition, but science, an attempt to describe why the world behaves predictably, yet remains vulnerable to disruption. At the center of this system is the calendar. Enoch is shown a solar year of 364 days, divided perfectly into weeks and seasons. This number is not chosen arbitrarily. It allows every festival to fall on the same day each year without drift. Time aligns with itself. Sacred observance becomes stable. Order is preserved. This calendar is presented as the original design, the system humanity was meant to follow. Any deviation is described not as cultural difference, but as corruption. Lunar calendars, which shift festivals year to year, are portrayed as distortions that introduce confusion and disorder into worship and society. When time loses consistency, so does morality. This is where the text becomes overtly confrontational. Control of the calendar in ancient societies meant control of religious life. Festivals dictated economic rhythms, agricultural cycles, and communal identity. By declaring existing calendars wrong, the Book of Enoch challenges the authority of priestly elites who govern time through ritual. In this light, the calendar dispute is not technical, it is political. If Enoch's calendar is correct, then institutions built on alternative systems are misaligned with cosmic law. Their authority is undermined at the most fundamental level. They are not just mistaken, they are out of sync with the universe. This insistence on temporal purity mirrors the earlier concern with biological purity. Just as hybridization corrupted flesh, temporal distortion corrupts practice. Order must be maintained across all dimensions: physical, moral, spiritual, and temporal. Corruption in one domain spreads to others. The emphasis on time also reveals a deeper anxiety. The Watchers' rebellion was not only sexual or technological, it was temporal. By introducing advanced knowledge prematurely, they accelerated humanity beyond its intended pace. Civilization grew faster than wisdom. Time was forced forward unnaturally. The calendar then becomes a corrective measure. It slows humanity down. It re-anchors life to a stable rhythm. Festivals recur predictably. Seasons return on schedule. Memory is reinforced through repetition. Time becomes a teacher rather than a weapon. Enoch's exposure to this system reinforces his role as a restorer of alignment. He is not simply reporting cosmic curiosities, he is transmitting corrective knowledge. The universe, according to this text, has a preferred rhythm. Deviating from it invites instability. This idea would have been deeply threatening to later religious authorities. If cosmic time is fixed and knowable, then access to truth is not limited to institutional mediation. Anyone who understands the system can align with it. Authority shifts from office to understanding. The regulation of time also connects directly to judgment. The final judgment is not random. It occurs at an appointed time, already set within the cosmic schedule. History is moving toward a predetermined moment. Nothing can hasten it or delay it. Human actions do not alter the timetable, they determine placement within it. This removes the illusion that chaos rules history. Events may appear disorderly, but the structure remains intact. Even rebellion unfolds within limits. The Watchers did not disrupt time itself, they disrupted space and biology. Time remained guarded. By revealing the mechanics of the heavens, Enoch dismantles the mystery surrounding fate. The future is not a fog, it is a trajectory. The universe is not improvising, it is executing a design. This also reframes human anxiety about uncertainty. Fear does not arise because the universe is unpredictable. It arises because humans are misaligned with its rhythm. When behavior contradicts structure, consequences feel random. When alignment is restored, patterns re-emerge. The Book of Enoch treats time as sacred infrastructure. To misuse it is to invite disorder. To control it unjustly is to manipulate reality itself. This is why the text is so uncompromising. Time is not flexible, it is law. By the time Enoch completes this portion of his journey, the message is unmistakable. The corruption that led to the flood was not limited to bodies and spirits. It threatened the rhythm of creation itself. The solution required more than destruction. It required recalibration. Once time is understood as regulated rather than arbitrary, the universe becomes less forgiving but more coherent. Actions matter because they unfold within a structure that remembers. Nothing is lost, nothing is rushed. Everything arrives when appointed. This vision of time leaves little room for convenience. It demands discipline, it demands patience, and it exposes why this text was so difficult to preserve within orthodox boundaries. A universe governed by immutable schedules leaves no space for negotiated truth. The heavens move as commanded, judgment waits its hour, and humanity, whether aware or not, lives according to a clock that cannot be reset by belief alone. Once the mechanics of time are revealed, the Book of Enoch turns toward authority itself. Order does not sustain itself automatically. It is maintained. Behind every regulated system Enoch has witnessed stands a hierarchy, not of human institutions, but of beings tasked with enforcement, mediation, and execution. The cosmos in this framework is not democratic, it is administered. At the center of this administration stand four figures whose roles define the balance between justice, power, restoration, and knowledge. These are the chief archangels, described not as symbolic ideals, but as functional agents operating near the highest level of cosmic authority. Their existence explains how divine will is translated into action without chaos or contradiction. Michael is presented first not as a warrior in the popular imagination, but as the custodian of justice. His responsibility is the righteous portion of humanity. He oversees balance, ensuring that law is applied without distortion. Michael's authority is judicial. He does not act impulsively. He weighs, measures, and enforces. When judgment is pronounced against the Watchers, Michael's role is to formalize it. He ensures that rebellion is addressed according to law, not rage. This portrayal reframes justice as structural rather than emotional. Justice is not vengeance, it is restoration of balance. Michael's presence ensures that righteousness is not forgotten amid cosmic upheaval. He stands as guarantor that obedience has meaning and that loyalty to order is recognized. Gabriel's role contrasts sharply. Where Michael governs law, Gabriel governs force. His name is associated with strength, and his function reflects that. Gabriel is tasked with elimination, particularly when corruption becomes biological. He is sent to destroy the offspring of the Watchers, the Nephilim, whose existence threatens extinction. Gabriel's intervention is decisive. There is no negotiation, no gradual correction. When contamination reaches critical levels, force is deployed. This division of responsibility is crucial. Justice alone cannot resolve every crisis. Power without justice becomes tyranny. The cosmos requires both. Gabriel embodies controlled destruction, used not to dominate, but to preserve the viability of creation. His actions are surgical, not chaotic. He removes what cannot be integrated. Raphael introduces a different dimension. His name is associated with healing, and his role aligns with containment and restoration. Raphael is assigned to bind Asael, the Watcher, most responsible for corrupting humanity with forbidden knowledge. This act is not framed as revenge, it is medical. Asael is restrained to prevent further harm. The earth cannot heal while the source of corruption remains active. Raphael's involvement signals that divine judgment includes recovery. Removal of threat is followed by stabilization. The goal is not endless punishment, but cessation of damage. Healing requires boundaries. Freedom is limited when it endangers others. Uriel completes the structure. His domain is knowledge and warning. He is the one who explains systems, reveals mechanisms, and interprets cosmic law. Without Uriel, Enoch would see but not understand. Uriel does not enforce or destroy. He illuminates. His function is preventative. By revealing the order of the universe, he reduces the likelihood of future rebellion. This fourfold structure reveals a universe governed through specialization. No single agent embodies all aspects of authority. Power is distributed to prevent imbalance. Justice, force, healing, and knowledge operate in coordination. This organization is presented as ideal, a model for how authority should function at every level of existence. What makes this hierarchy unsettling is its implication for human systems. Human institutions often concentrate power, merging authority, enforcement, and interpretation into single offices. The Book of Enoch presents this as inherently unstable. True order requires division of responsibility. The Archangels also demonstrate proximity without equality. They operate near the throne, but they are not autonomous. They receive orders. They do not debate outcomes. Their obedience underscores the severity of the Watcher's rebellion. Those who were closest to authority fell hardest. This hierarchy also reframes prayer and intercession. When the earth cries out under the violence of the Nephilim, it is the archangels who respond. They bring the case before the highest authority. They advocate for intervention. This suggests that suffering is not ignored but processed through a system designed to respond. The existence of this structure removes randomness from cosmic events. Disasters are not expressions of mood. They are outcomes of decision-making. Intervention occurs when thresholds are crossed. Mercy operates within limits. This portrayal of divine governance was difficult for later theology to absorb. It implied that the universe functions like a state with laws, officers, and enforcement mechanisms. Faith alone does not override structure. Alignment does. The archangels are not accessible to human manipulation. They cannot be bribed, appeased, or deceived. Their loyalty is absolute. This contrasts sharply with the Watchers, whose failure stemmed from desire to participate rather than observe. The difference between the two groups defines the boundary between service and rebellion. By revealing these figures, Enoch exposes the architecture behind reality. Power is not arbitrary, authority is layered, consequences are enforced. This also redefines the role of humanity. Humans are not pawns in an angelic conflict. They are beneficiaries and victims of administrative decisions. When order is upheld, they flourish. When it is violated, they suffer. The archangels represent the stabilizing force that prevents total collapse. Without them, rebellion would cascade unchecked. Their presence assures that no single failure can dismantle creation entirely. This vision stands in stark contrast to later simplified narratives that reduce cosmic struggle to good versus evil in abstract terms. Enoch presents governance, not mythology. Administration, not allegory. Once this framework is understood, the world appears less chaotic and more constrained. History unfolds within a managed system. The Watchers fell because they rejected this structure. The archangels remain because they embody it. And in that contrast lies the deeper warning. Power without restraint destroys. Knowledge without order corrupts. Authority without accountability collapses. The cosmos survives not because it is forgiving, but because it is governed. And that governance revealed through Enoch leaves little room for human illusion about control. Humanity exists within a hierarchy it did not design and cannot dismantle. Understanding this hierarchy is not empowering, it is sobering. It reminds humanity that order does not emerge from desire, but from submission to structure older and stronger than any civilization that rises above the earth. With the hierarchy of the cosmos laid bare, the Book of Enoch moves toward its most unsettling revelation, the throne itself. Everything Enoch has seen so far, judgment, confinement, timekeeping, angelic administration, points toward a single center of gravity. Authority does not diffuse endlessly, it converges, and at that convergence stands a presence so overwhelming that even celestial beings do not approach it casually. Enoch is taken upward through successive levels of the heavens until he reaches the highest chamber. This ascent is not described as effortless. The atmosphere changes, light intensifies, heat becomes palpable, sound itself seems to fracture. What awaits him is not a comforting image of divinity, but a vision designed to overwhelm human perception. The throne is not furniture, it is an event. The throne appears forged from fire and crystal, a structure that radiates energy rather than reflecting it. Rivers of flame flow from beneath it, not consuming but emanating, as if judgment itself is a physical force spilling into the universe. The space around the throne is alive with motion, yet absolutely ordered. Thousands upon thousands of beings surround it, arranged not in chaos but in ranks, each aware of position and function. At the center sits the figure known as the Ancient of Days. This title does not describe age in human terms, it signals existence prior to time itself. The Ancient of Days is not bound by chronology, he precedes it. His appearance reinforces this idea. His hair is described as white, not from decay, but from intensity like light, stripped of color. His presence does not invite intimacy, it enforces recognition. This vision establishes a critical distinction. God is not portrayed as a distant abstraction or a symbolic force. He is depicted as an active judge, seated, presiding, aware. His role is not creation in this moment, but evaluation. Books are opened. Records are consulted. Nothing is forgotten. Nothing is assumed. What makes this vision particularly disruptive is its continuity. Later prophetic texts, most notably in the Book of Daniel, echo this exact imagery. The throne of fire, the Ancient of Days, the assembled hosts. This continuity suggests that Enoch's vision was not isolated imagination, but a foundational template for apocalyptic thought. Later writers did not invent this imagery, they inherited it. But Enoch's account goes further. He does not only see the judge, he sees someone beside the throne. This figure is not immediately described. He is concealed, reserved, set apart. He is referred to as the chosen one, the righteous one, the Son of Man. These titles are not interchangeable metaphors. They describe a role. This figure exists before creation. He is hidden until the appointed time. His authority is not granted gradually. It is inherent. When he is revealed, kings tremble. The powerful are stripped of illusion. The Son of Man does not argue. He executes judgment. This portrayal radically predates later messianic expectations. The Messiah here is not a political liberator or moral teacher. He is a cosmic adjudicator. His concern is not reforming society, but rectifying reality. He judges rulers, not followers. Power is his focus. The implications of this are enormous. Judgment is not delivered solely by the Ancient of Days. Authority is delegated. The Son of Man acts as executor of divine justice. This introduces complexity into the nature of divine governance. Judgment is unified but distributed. This also reframes the role of humanity. The righteous are not rewarded because of institutional allegiance. They are vindicated because alignment with order places them on the correct side of an inevitable reckoning. The wicked are not punished because they are disliked. They are removed because they destabilize structure. The vision emphasizes exposure. Nothing survives scrutiny. Wealth, titles, and dominance dissolve in the presence of the throne. Those who appeared invincible on earth are revealed as temporary constructs. The throne reveals what time conceals. This moment also clarifies why the flood was not the final solution. The flood addressed biological corruption. The throne addresses moral and structural corruption across all ages. The flood was localized in time. Judgment is universal. The existence of the Son of Man explains the persistence of evil after containment. The Watchers are bound, the Nephilim are destroyed, their spirits roam, humanity continues. Final resolution requires a figure capable of addressing every layer simultaneously. Flesh, spirit, power, and memory must all be judged. This is why the Son of Man is hidden. Premature revelation would disrupt the system. Judgment must arrive when accumulation is complete. History must finish recording before the books can close. This idea profoundly influenced later theology, even when its source was denied. The language used by Jesus of Nazareth when referring to himself draws directly from this description. He does not call himself king or prophet. He uses the title Son of Man, a term loaded with apocalyptic authority. For those familiar with Enoch, the implication would have been unmistakable. This connection was deeply uncomfortable for emerging religious institutions. If the Son of Man predates creation and holds cosmic authority, then divine judgment bypasses earthly mediation. Institutions cannot claim exclusive representation. Authority flows from alignment, not appointment. The throne vision leaves no room for negotiation. Judgment is not delayed by argument. Mercy exists, but it operates within structure. Compassion does not cancel consequence, it redirects it. Enoch's reaction to this vision is not joy, it is collapse. He is overwhelmed, physically undone by proximity to absolute authority. This reinforces the severity of what he witnesses. The throne is not meant to be approachable. It is meant to be final. By revealing this vision, the Book of Enoch exposes the end toward which all history moves. Not progress, not enlightenment, judgment, restoration through removal, order through exposure. This is why the text was dangerous. It did not offer comfort through ambiguity. It offered certainty through inevitability. A universe governed by a throne of fire leaves little space for denial. And once this vision is seen, the silence imposed upon it becomes understandable. A God who judges openly, a Son of Man who dismantles power, and a system that remembers everything is not easily integrated into narratives designed to soothe. The throne stands unmoved. The records remain open. Time continues its march toward a conclusion that has already been prepared. And humanity, whether aware or not, lives every moment under the shadow of a judgment that does not forget and does not fail. After the vision of the throne and the revelation of ultimate authority, the Book of Enoch shifts its method without softening its message. The cosmos has been mapped, judgment has been defined, and power has been identified. Now history itself is reinterpreted. What follows is not a new doctrine, but a new way of seeing the past. Enoch receives this perspective through dreams, not because they are vague, but because they compress vast spans of time into a single symbolic language. These dreams do not predict isolated events. They retell the entire story of humanity from creation to final judgment. stripping it down to patterns of behavior and consequence. This section of the text treats history as evidence. Every rise and collapse becomes part of a moral record. Nothing is accidental, nothing is forgotten. The first dream presents destruction returning once more, echoing the flood. But unlike the earlier catastrophe, this vision emphasizes recurrence. Violence does not end with water. It resurfaces whenever order collapses. The message is unmistakable. Intervention may pause corruption, but it does not erase the human capacity to recreate it. The second dream expands into a sweeping allegory often called the vision of animals. Humans are no longer described as individuals or nations by name. They are represented as creatures, each chosen for its behavioral symbolism. This is not disguise, it is diagnosis. The earliest humans appear as cattle, powerful but unrefined. Adam is portrayed as a white bull, signaling origin and purity. From him emerge other cattle, some maintaining integrity, others degrading into chaos. When the Watchers fall, they are represented as stars descending from the sky, reinforcing their celestial origin and violent intrusion into the earthly domain. The Nephilim appear as monstrous offspring, immediately destructive. Their behavior matches earlier descriptions. They consume without restraint. They dominate until removed. Their presence distorts every system they touch. Once again, destruction follows. As history advances, animals diversify, humanity fragments, sheep emerge, symbolizing a chosen lineage marked by vulnerability rather than dominance. Predatory animals rise alongside them, wolves, lions, dogs, and birds of prey. These figures represent oppressive powers, empires, and rulers who exploit rather than protect. What makes this vision disturbing is its consistency. Power always shifts toward predation. Those entrusted with care become exploiters. Shepherds appointed to guard the sheep repeatedly fail. Some abandon their role, others actively harm those they were meant to protect. This imagery strips leadership of illusion. Authority is not defined by title, but by behavior. A shepherd who feeds himself while the flock starves is no longer a shepherd. He becomes a predator, regardless of his position. As the vision continues, the sheep suffer repeatedly. They are scattered, attacked, and devoured, yet they persist. Their survival is not due to strength, but endurance. This endurance becomes the measure of righteousness. Survival itself is testimony. Eventually, intervention returns. A great sword appears, wielded not by sheep, but by appointed agents. Predators are judged. Shepherds are held accountable. Their failures are recorded meticulously. This reinforces a central theme. Power is not judged by success, but by stewardship. One of the most striking elements of this vision is the presence of watchers assigned to observe the shepherds. These watchers record actions without intervening. Their role mirrors that of the original watchers, but without corruption. Observation is not inherently evil, interference is. This distinction clarifies where the original watchers failed. They abandoned observation for participation. The watchers in the dream maintain restraint. They record, they wait. Judgment follows observation, not impulse. As history moves toward its conclusion, a transformation occurs. The sheep are no longer defenseless. They begin to see, their eyes open. Awareness spreads. This does not make them predators, it makes them resistant. Knowledge, when properly timed, becomes protection rather than corruption. At the climax of the vision, a final transformation takes place. The sheep are changed into white cattle once more, returning to a state of restored strength without predatory impulse. The original design is not replaced, it is recovered. A new house is built, larger and more luminous than the former. This is not a temple of stone, but a symbol of restored order. The Ancient of Days appears again. The Son of Man is present. Judgment concludes. Predators are removed permanently. This retelling of history accomplishes something subtle but devastating. It denies the idea that suffering is meaningless. Every act of oppression is seen. Every abuse of authority is logged. Time does not bury crimes. It preserves them. At the same time, the vision removes the illusion of inevitable progress. History does not naturally improve. It oscillates between order and collapse. Improvement requires intervention. Left alone, systems decay. This worldview leaves little room for optimism based on human nature alone. Hope does not arise from evolution or enlightenment. It arises from accountability, the assurance that failure is not final and injustice is not eternal. For the communities that preserved this text, the vision functioned as resistance literature. It reminded them that empires rise temporarily. Predators appear dominant, but their power is borrowed and their time limited. This is why the Book of Enoch was dangerous. It reframed history as a courtroom, not a battlefield. Victory does not belong to the strongest. It belongs to those aligned with order when judgment arrives. The dream vision also undermines the authority of corrupt leadership. Shepherds are not immune to judgment. Appointment does not guarantee protection. The higher the responsibility, the heavier the sentence. By presenting history through animals, the text removes nationalism, ethnicity, and ideology from the equation. Behavior is all that remains. Predators are predators regardless of banner. Sheep remain sheep regardless of geography. This universality threatened institutions built on identity and power. A system where all authority is provisional and all actions recorded is deeply unsettling to those who benefit from opacity. As the vision ends, Enoch is not comforted, he is burdened. To see history from this height is to lose the ability to believe in accidental injustice. Everything becomes intentional, measured, and answerable. The dreams do not offer escape, they offer clarity. Humanity is shown not as a victim of fate, but as a participant in a system that remembers. Suffering is acknowledged, but so is responsibility. Once this perspective is accepted, history can no longer be dismissed as chaos. It becomes a ledger, and the certainty that every page will be read changes how the present must be lived. This is the quiet power of Enoch's dream vision. It does not shout, it catalogues, and in doing so, it exposes why a text that turns history itself into evidence could never be safely placed in the hands of those who prefer to control the narrative rather than answer to it. After history has been exposed and judgment defined, the Book of Enoch turns its focus toward the living. This shift is not gentle, it is confrontational. Having revealed how the universe operates and how power is ultimately evaluated, the text addresses those who must exist within that system day by day. What follows is not prophecy in the sense of prediction, but instruction forged under pressure. These are words meant for people who live in a world where corruption often appears to win. Enoch speaks directly to future generations, not as a distant mystic, but as a witness who has seen the consequences of both obedience and rebellion. His tone is urgent. The injustice of the world is not denied. It is acknowledged openly. The righteous suffer, the violent prosper, the powerful exploit. This is not a theological problem to be explained away. It is a condition to be endured with awareness. One of the central targets of this exhortation is wealth acquired through oppression. Enoch does not condemn wealth itself. He condemns accumulation that depends on exploitation. Those who grow rich by crushing others are described as building foundations on blood. Their prosperity is portrayed as temporary insulation, not protection. It delays consequence but intensifies it. The text describes the wealthy oppressor as someone who feels untouchable. Their houses are fortified. Their influence extends into courts and councils. They control narratives and silence dissent. Yet in Enoch's worldview, this apparent security is illusory. Wealth does not erase record, it sharpens it. Every act of injustice is stored, waiting to be weighed. This emphasis would have resonated deeply with communities living under imperial domination. For them, power was distant and unaccountable. Enoch's message reverses that perception. Power is never unobserved. The more elevated the position, the greater the scrutiny. The arrogance of the powerful is not just moral failure, it is miscalculation. The righteous, by contrast, are described as those who endure without surrendering alignment. Their defining trait is not victory, but persistence. They do not control outcomes, they control conduct. This distinction is crucial. Enoch does not promise that righteousness will be rewarded immediately. He promises that it will be remembered accurately. Patience becomes a form of resistance. Refusing to adopt the methods of oppressors preserves integrity. This is not passive submission, it is strategic endurance. The righteous are instructed to avoid despair, not because suffering is minimal, but because its duration is finite. Enoch is explicit about the emotional toll of injustice. He does not spiritualize pain into abstraction. Tears are acknowledged, anger is understood. What is prohibited is surrender to corruption as a coping mechanism. To become predatory in response to predators is to join the very system that will be judged. This is why Enoch repeatedly emphasizes knowledge, not secret knowledge meant to dominate, but awareness of structure. Understanding how the universe functions prevents false conclusions. Without that understanding, suffering appears meaningless. With it, suffering becomes testimony. The text also confronts those who mock restraint. The arrogant dismiss warnings as superstition. They treat judgment as a myth designed to control behavior. Enoch responds by reframing disbelief as self-deception. Ignorance of consequence does not prevent its arrival, it merely removes preparation. One of the most striking elements of this section is its refusal to flatter the righteous. They are not portrayed as superior beings, they are fragile, often fearful, sometimes confused. Their strength lies in refusal to abandon order when disorder would be easier. Their righteousness is costly. That cost is acknowledged. Enoch also addresses the temptation to envy the wicked. Prosperity achieved through injustice is seductive. It appears efficient. It promises relief from vulnerability. The text counters this by exposing its end. The downfall of the wicked is not portrayed as dramatic revenge. It is portrayed as collapse. Structures built without alignment eventually fail under their own weight. The imagery used is agricultural. Seeds sown in violence produce harvests of ruin. Time does not forgive misalignment. It amplifies it. What appears successful in one season becomes catastrophic in another. This reinforces the earlier emphasis on cosmic timing. Judgment arrives when accumulation is complete. The exhortation also warns against complacency among the righteous. Endurance does not equal immunity. Awareness must be maintained. Alignment must be renewed continually. The presence of lingering corruption, especially in the form of invisible spiritual pressure, demands vigilance. Neutrality is not an option. Drift leads to vulnerability. This section of the text functions as an ethical manual for life between catastrophes. The flood has passed. Final judgment has not yet arrived. Humanity exists in the interval. Choices made here matter precisely because resolution is delayed. The language becomes almost instructional. Avoid arrogance, reject violence. Do not exploit weakness, maintain humility. These are not abstract virtues, they are survival strategies in a world still affected by ancient contamination. Moral discipline is framed as protective equipment. Enoch also emphasizes collective responsibility. Communities are judged as well as individuals. Systems that normalize exploitation are condemned regardless of personal piety within them. This challenges the idea that private virtue can compensate for public injustice. Alignment must extend beyond intention into structure. This insistence would have been deeply uncomfortable for later religious institutions aligned with political power. A worldview that condemns unjust systems leaves little room for compromise. It demands reform or removal. The exhortation closes with assurance, not comfort. The righteous are told they will be vindicated but not spared struggle. Their vindication will occur when judgment is executed, not when circumstances improve. This preserves realism while sustaining hope. Enoch's final tone is neither optimistic nor despairing. It is resolved. The universe is stable. Order is enforced. History is accountable. Suffering is temporary. Corruption is terminal. By placing this exhortation after visions of cosmic authority, the text reinforces its legitimacy. These are not moral opinions. They are instructions aligned with the structure of reality itself. To ignore them is not rebellion against tradition, but against order. This is why the Book of Enoch remained dangerous long after its exclusion. It does not merely describe a hidden past. It demands present alignment. It refuses to console without correction. It offers hope without illusion. For those who preserved it, these words were not abstract theology. They were guidance for survival under unjust power. They reminded the oppressed that endurance was not weakness, and that silence was not invisibility. And in doing so, the text exposed a truth many preferred to forget. The greatest test of faith is not belief in unseen wonders, but loyalty to order when disorder appears to rule the world. As the Book of Enoch draws closer to its conclusion, its focus narrows from cosmic scale to historical survival. Having revealed the structure of the universe, the fate of angels, the mechanics of judgment, and the endurance required of the righteous, the text now confronts a troubling reality. Truth does not automatically endure. Knowledge can vanish, revelation can be buried, memory itself can be erased unless deliberately preserved. Enoch's own writings anticipate this danger. The text repeatedly acknowledges that what has been revealed will be rejected, distorted, or forgotten by future generations. This is not framed as tragedy alone, but as inevitability. Human systems favor convenience over accuracy. Power prefers narratives it can control. Information that destabilizes authority is rarely destroyed openly. It is neglected until it fades. This is why the survival of Enoch's text is as remarkable as its content. For centuries, it disappeared from the intellectual map of the Western world. Scholars referenced it indirectly, quoting fragments or alluding to ideas without access to the source itself. It existed as rumor, shadow, and footnote. Official theology moved forward as if it had never been foundational. Yet the Book of Enoch was never truly lost. It was preserved in isolation by communities that never accepted its exclusion. In the highlands of Ethiopia, far from the political and theological centers of Europe and the Near East, the text remained intact. For the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, Enoch was never apocryphal. It was scripture. It was copied, read, and transmitted continuously in its liturgical language, untouched by the debates that erased it elsewhere. This geographic isolation functioned as protection. While councils debated canon and institutions standardized belief, Ethiopia remained outside that process. The result was accidental preservation. What was politically inconvenient elsewhere survived where it posed no immediate threat to centralized authority. The re-emergence of Enoch in the modern world did not occur through religious reform, but through exploration. In the 18th century, European scholars believed the text existed only in fragments quoted by ancient writers. Then a Scottish traveller named James Bruce returned from Ethiopia with multiple complete manuscripts. What he brought back was not a curiosity, it was a problem. When the text was translated and studied, its age could not be dismissed. Linguistic analysis confirmed that it was not a medieval invention. Its themes aligned with Second Temple Judaism. Its quotations in early Christian texts suddenly made sense. The silence surrounding it was exposed as selective. This rediscovery forced scholars to confront an uncomfortable question. If the Book of Enoch was ancient, influential, and widely known, why had it been excluded? The answer lay not in authenticity, but in compatibility. Enoch did not fit neatly into emerging doctrinal frameworks. It complicated demonology. It disrupted linear salvation narratives. It challenged institutional mediation of knowledge. The problem deepened with the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls in the mid-20th century. Among the thousands of fragments recovered from the caves near Qumran were multiple copies of Enoch written in Aramaic. This was decisive. It confirmed that Enoch was not preserved only in Ethiopia. It had been widely circulated in Judea centuries before Christianity. More copies of Enoch were found at Qumran than many texts that later became canonical. This statistical reality was impossible to ignore. Communities deeply engaged with apocalyptic thought treated Enoch as essential. It was not fringe material, it was core curriculum. This discovery dismantled the final defense against Enoch's relevance. It could no longer be dismissed as late, foreign, or marginal. Its exclusion was no longer a historical accident. It was a decision. The implications were profound. If Enoch shaped early Jewish and Christian cosmology, then later theology had been built on selective memory. Certain ideas were retained, others were quietly abandoned. Demonology was simplified, angelology was flattened, the flood was moralized, cosmic rebellion was minimized. Enoch's return exposed these omissions. It reintroduced a worldview where evil had origin, structure, and persistence, where judgment was procedural, not emotional, where history was accountable, where power was temporary. This made the text uncomfortable not only for religious institutions but for modern sensibilities as well. Its universe is not therapeutic. It does not prioritize individual fulfillment. It prioritizes alignment. Order matters more than comfort. Truth matters more than inclusion. The rediscovery of Enoch did not trigger widespread reintegration. Instead, it produced compartmentalization. Scholars studied it academically, theologians referenced it cautiously, popular culture sensationalized fragments, but full engagement remained rare. This pattern mirrors the text's own warnings. Knowledge that threatens structure is often isolated rather than confronted. It is acknowledged without being absorbed, preserved without being applied. Yet the presence of Enoch continues to exert pressure. Its ideas resurface in discussions of the supernatural, in questions about the origin of evil, in reinterpretations of biblical passages that suddenly regain depth. Genesis 6 no longer reads as a curiosity. It reads as a summary. The Book of Enoch also reframes the concept of Scripture itself. It suggests that canon formation was not purely spiritual discernment but also negotiation. Texts were evaluated not only for truth but for manageability. Enoch was too detailed, too specific, too destabilizing. This does not mean it was excluded maliciously, it means it was excluded pragmatically. A theology that admits ancient cosmic contamination, lingering spiritual entities, and immediate post-mortem judgment demands vigilance that few institutions wish to impose indefinitely. Enoch demands responsibility without delay. It removes excuses. It exposes power. It insists that alignment is measurable and consequence unavoidable. Such a worldview is difficult to institutionalize without losing control. This is why its rediscovery did not lead to restoration. The world had moved on, structures had been built without it. Reintroducing Enoch fully would require revision, not supplementation. Yet the text remains. It cannot be erased again. It exists as evidence that alternative frameworks once shaped belief at the highest levels. It stands as a reminder that history is not linear and that what is excluded does not cease to matter. The survival of the Book of Enoch is itself a testimony. Truth does not always prevail through dominance. Sometimes it survives through neglect, waiting for rediscovery when conditions change. And when it returns, it does not ask for permission. It challenges foundations. It exposes omissions. It reminds humanity that forgetting is not the same as resolving. The silence that once buried Enoch is now part of its meaning. It reveals not only what was hidden, but why it was hidden, and that perhaps more than any angelic vision or cosmic judgment is the most unsettling revelation of all. With the Book of Enoch resurfacing into modern awareness, its most unsettling impact is not theological but interpretive. Familiar biblical passages begin to shift. Verses once treated as symbolic, marginal, or decorative suddenly regain weight. The text does not replace Scripture, it recontextualizes it. What once seemed brief or incomplete now appears intentionally compressed, as if the canonical record assumed a background its readers would no longer possess. Nowhere is this more evident than in the opening chapters of Genesis. The account of the sons of God and the daughters of men has long been treated as either metaphor or embarrassment. The ambiguity allowed generations to bypass it. With Enoch restored to view, that ambiguity collapses. The passage is no longer mysterious, it is summarized. This realization reframes the early biblical narrative. Genesis does not tell the full story because it does not need to. It gestures toward a catastrophe already known to its audience. Enoch fills that silence not by inventing detail, but by preserving memory that was once assumed. The flood narrative transforms from moral parable into strategic intervention. Judgment is no longer reactive, it is preventative. This interpretive shift ripples outward. References to demons throughout later texts take on sharper definition. They are no longer generic adversaries or abstract symbols of temptation. They become remnants, survivors of a disaster whose origin lies outside human rebellion. This reframes spiritual struggle as inherited consequence rather than spontaneous failure. Even the language of possession gains new coherence. If malignant spirits are disembodied entities driven by deprivation, then their behavior is not arbitrary. Their influence is compulsive. Their persistence is structural. This does not absolve humans of responsibility, but it explains why resistance requires discipline rather than denial. The figure of Satan itself is altered by this framework. Enoch does not center cosmic evil on a singular antagonist orchestrating all corruption. Authority among the fallen is fragmented. The watchers are bound. The spirits of the Nephilim roam. Satan becomes one actor among many, not the sole architect of disorder. This decentralization of evil removes the convenience of a single enemy. Such a worldview demands greater accountability. Evil cannot be externalized entirely, nor can it be simplified. It emerges from layered failure, celestial rebellion, human misuse of knowledge, institutional corruption, and personal choice. No single scapegoat absorbs the blame. This complexity also reframes salvation. Redemption is no longer framed solely as forgiveness of individual sin. It becomes restoration of alignment within a damaged system. Salvation addresses contamination as much as guilt. Healing requires order, not only belief. This may explain why Enoch's influence persisted indirectly even after its exclusion. Concepts embedded in later theology, fallen angels, hierarchical heavens, apocalyptic judgment, the Son of Man, bear unmistakable resemblance to its framework. The text was removed, but its architecture remained embedded. What was lost was coherence. Ideas survived in fragments, detached from their original context. Over time they hardened into doctrine without memory of origin. Enoch's return exposes that fragmentation. It reconnects ideas that had been separated for manageability. This reconnection is uncomfortable. It reveals that theology did not evolve solely through revelation, but through omission. Some narratives were streamlined, others were silenced. The result was a system easier to teach, but less complete. Modern readers often approach Enoch with suspicion, conditioned to distrust what lies outside official canon. Yet the text itself anticipated this reaction. It warned that truth would be delayed, not denied, that generations would forget, then rediscover. The discomfort Enoch produces today mirrors the discomfort it produced centuries ago. Its universe is not flexible. It does not adjust to preference. It does not prioritize emotional reassurance. It demands alignment with structure rather than reinterpretation. This rigidity is precisely what made it dangerous. A worldview where cosmic order exists independently of human approval undermines both political and religious authority. It places power beyond negotiation. The Book of Enoch also destabilizes modern assumptions about progress. It suggests that humanity once possessed greater awareness of cosmic realities than it does now. Forgetting is framed as regression, not enlightenment. Knowledge was not slowly discovered. It was gradually lost. This challenges the narrative of linear advancement. Ancient peoples are not portrayed as primitive or ignorant. They are portrayed as witnesses closer to catastrophe, closer to consequence, and therefore more aware of the stakes. In this light, modern skepticism appears less like sophistication and more like distance. Removed from the immediacy of ancient trauma, later generations reinterpreted warnings as myths. Enoch insists they were records. The text also reframes silence itself. What is not said in canonical scripture becomes as important as what is said. Absence is no longer neutral. It is intentional compression. Enoch functions as the missing background layer. This does not demand blind acceptance. It demands reconsideration. The text does not ask to be believed uncritically. It asks to be understood within the world that produced it. That world was not preoccupied with abstraction. It was responding to perceived cosmic instability. Angels could fall. Giants could walk. Floods could erase. Judgment could intervene. These were not metaphors, they were existential explanations. By reintroducing Enoch, modern readers are forced to confront the possibility that ancient theology was less naive than assumed. Its concerns were not imaginary, they were structural. The discomfort does not come from angels or giants, it comes from implication. If the universe is governed by fixed order, if corruption accumulates consequence, if judgment is procedural, then belief alone is insufficient. Alignment becomes measurable. This is the challenge Enoch poses to every generation that encounters it. It removes the safety of ambiguity. It replaces mystery with mechanism. It transforms faith from sentiment into responsibility. The Book of Enoch does not seek to replace Scripture, it seeks to remind it of its original context. And in doing so, it exposes how much has been forgotten, not because it was false, but because it was too demanding to preserve intact. The rediscovery of Enoch is not an invitation to nostalgia. It is a confrontation, a reminder that theology once grappled with a universe far less forgiving than the one modern belief often assumes. And once that confrontation is accepted, the question is no longer whether Enoch belongs in the canon, but whether its absence has shaped a worldview more comfortable, more manageable, and far less honest than the one it replaced. As the Book of Enoch reaches its final horizon, it no longer introduces new visions or additional characters. Instead, it tightens its grip on everything already revealed and draws the implications to their unavoidable conclusion. What began as a hidden account of angels and giants resolves into a statement about the condition of reality itself. The world as it exists now is not neutral ground, it is stabilized aftermath. The universe Enoch describes is not waiting to be saved from chaos. Chaos has already been addressed. The rebellion of the Watchers has failed. The Nephilim have been destroyed. The flood has reset biological continuity. The prison beneath the earth holds the primary offenders. Time runs according to fixed schedules. Judgment is prepared. In this sense, the cosmic crisis is over. What remains is human response. This is the most uncomfortable shift of all. Responsibility no longer belongs to angels, giants, or ancient catastrophes. It belongs to those living within the repaired structure. Humanity is not asked to survive a war. It is asked to live correctly in its aftermath. Enoch's final warnings emphasize that ignorance is no longer an excuse. Once knowledge of order exists, misalignment becomes choice. The righteous are not defined by perfection, but by orientation. They align themselves with structure, even when it costs them security, status, or comfort. Their lives become evidence. The wicked, by contrast, are not portrayed as villains in a dramatic sense. They are misaligned actors who exploit instability for personal gain. Their defining feature is not cruelty alone, but short-term thinking. They behave as if consequence can be outrun, as if time forgets. Enoch insists it does not. One of the most sobering elements of this conclusion is the absence of urgency to convert or persuade. The text does not plead, it records. It assumes separation will occur naturally based on alignment. Judgment does not require mass agreement, it requires accuracy. This undermines performative morality. Public displays of righteousness are irrelevant if behavior contradicts order. Titles, affiliations, and rituals hold no weight at the point of evaluation. What matters is whether one's actions reinforced or degraded the stability of creation. The final judgment, as Enoch presents it, is not emotional, it is administrative. Records are reviewed, outcomes are assigned, restoration and removal occur simultaneously. The righteous are not elevated to dominance, they are restored to function. The wicked are not tortured for spectacle, they are excluded because they cannot coexist with order. This functional approach to judgment is deeply unsettling to traditions that rely on moral drama. There is no catharsis here, no reversal of power through revenge. The outcome is quiet, final, and irreversible. Enoch also clarifies that the final transformation is not the creation of something entirely new. It is restoration. The world returns to a state closer to its original design, free from contamination and distortion. The righteous do not inherit a fantasy realm, they inherit a repaired reality. This reinforces a theme present throughout the text. Creation was not flawed in conception, it was compromised through interference. Redemption is not reinvention, it is correction. The lingering presence of the spirits of the Nephilim is resolved at this stage. Their wandering ends, their hunger is extinguished. The contamination that water could not remove is finally addressed. The universe becomes coherent again, not because struggle ends, but because intrusion does. What remains after judgment is stability, not perfection in the sense of comfort, but equilibrium. Boundaries hold, knowledge is distributed appropriately, authority operates within defined limits. Time continues, but without corruption accumulating unchecked. This resolution also reframes hope. Hope is not escape from reality. It is confidence in structure, the assurance that order will not collapse permanently, that intervention is not arbitrary, that alignment matters. The Book of Enoch closes without ceremony. There is no invitation to imagine oneself as hero or victim. There is only alignment or misalignment, survival or removal, participation or exclusion. This lack of sentimentality explains why the text resisted integration into systems built around reassurance. Enoch does not comfort the reader, it calibrates them. The final impression left by the text is not fear of judgment, but clarity of position. The universe is not undecided, it is patient. Delay exists for accumulation, not indecision. Enoch's own role fades at this point. Having delivered the record, he recedes. His importance was never personal, it was functional. He served as witness, courier, and archivist. Once the record is complete, the witness is no longer needed. This reinforces the text's refusal to elevate intermediaries. Knowledge is delivered, then responsibility transfers. No prophet remains to negotiate outcomes. For modern readers, this conclusion is particularly disquieting. It offers no space to reinterpret reality into something softer. It insists that meaning exists independent of belief. Structure precedes opinion. The Book of Enoch does not ask to be admired, it demands to be reckoned with. Its worldview is internally consistent, historically grounded, and ethically unforgiving. By ending without spectacle, it leaves the reader alone with implication. If the universe operates this way, then daily choices are not trivial, they are contributions to alignment or distortion. This is the final offense of Enoch. It refuses to remain ancient history. It positions itself as diagnostic tool for every age that encounters it. Each generation becomes a test case. The text's survival into the present moment suggests that its task is unfinished, not because judgment has failed, but because responsibility persists until resolution. In the end, the Book of Enoch offers no escape, no ritual guarantee, and no sentimental promise. It offers structure, it offers consequence, it offers restoration through alignment. And that may be why, after centuries of silence, its voice still unsettles. Not because it speaks of angels and giants, but because it insists that the world is already measured, already recorded, and already moving toward an outcome that does not negotiate. The universe, as Enoch presents it, does not ask who you are. It asks where you stand. When the Book of Enoch finally falls silent, it does not close a story so much as withdraw a lens. Everything essential has already been placed on the table. The origin of corruption has been traced. The mechanisms of judgment have been exposed. The fate of angels, giants, spirits, nations, and individuals has been mapped with unsettling precision. What remains is not revelation, but confrontation. The reader is left alone with a universe that no longer allows plausible deniability. Most enduring consequence of Enoch's worldview is the removal of moral ambiguity as refuge. Evil is not mysterious, it has lineage, it has behavior, it has outcome. Suffering is not random, it accumulates testimony. Justice is not delayed by forgetfulness, it is delayed by design. Time exists not to erase record, but to complete it. This framework strips away comforting simplifications. The world is not broken because humanity failed once in a garden. It is damaged because boundaries were violated at multiple levels, and those violations produced cascading consequences that required catastrophic intervention. The flood was not the climax. It was containment. History since then has been probation. Within this probationary world, humanity is neither helpless nor sovereign. People are not victims of fate nor masters of destiny. They are participants in a structure older than civilization, accountable to laws that do not change to accommodate preference. Freedom exists, but only within alignment. Outside it, choice accelerates collapse. This understanding radically alters the meaning of responsibility. Ignorance is no longer innocence. Distance from ancient events does not lessen obligation. Knowledge lost through neglect does not excuse misalignment. The structure remains whether remembered or not. The Book of Enoch does not demand belief in order to function. Its universe operates independently of acceptance. The sun follows its gates. Judgment waits its hour. Records accumulate without consultation. Reality does not require validation. This is why Enoch continues to unsettle even those who reject its authority. Its logic is internally consistent. Its explanations resolve gaps left elsewhere. Its discomfort does not arise from fantasy but from coherence. The modern impulse is to soften such frameworks, to reinterpret them as myth or metaphor. Yet Enoch resists metaphorization. Its language is functional. Places have purpose, beings have roles, consequences follow behavior. The text behaves less like poetry and more like documentation. This does not mean it must be read uncritically. It means it must be taken seriously as a worldview that once structured belief at the highest levels. Dismissing it as primitive says more about modern discomfort than ancient ignorance. The return of Enoch into contemporary awareness exposes how much has been filtered out of mainstream theology in the name of manageability. Complexity was reduced, threats were centralized, judgment was postponed indefinitely, responsibility was abstracted. Enoch reverses that process. It decentralizes evil. It distributes responsibility. It makes judgment procedural rather than emotional. It replaces comforting mystery with unsettling clarity. This clarity has consequences. If demons are remnants of ancient corruption rather than abstract forces, then moral struggle is environmental as well as personal. If angels can fall through boundary violation, then proximity to power is a liability, not a privilege. If judgment is inevitable and impartial, then alignment matters more than identity. The text also removes the illusion that history trends naturally toward improvement. Progress is not guaranteed. Order must be maintained. Left unattended, systems decay. Civilization is fragile not because humans are weak, but because alignment requires effort. This worldview offers no shortcuts. There is no ritual that overrides structure, no belief that nullifies consequence, no affiliation that replaces conduct. Alignment is behavioral, sustained, and visible. The enduring relevance of Enoch lies precisely here. It refuses to flatter humanity. It does not portray people as doomed or exalted, but as accountable. The universe is not hostile. It is structured. Those who align with it endure. Those who exploit it are eventually removed. The final impression left by the Book of Enoch is not fear, but sobriety. The reader is not urged to panic, but to position themselves accurately. Life becomes less about self-expression and more about orientation. This is why Enoch never truly disappeared. Its ideas resurfaced wherever people sensed that simplified explanations failed to account for persistent injustice, recurring corruption, and unresolved suffering. Its framework answers questions that reductionist theology leaves open. The silence imposed on Enoch was not about falsehood, it was about difficulty. A universe governed this strictly leaves little room for manipulation. Institutions thrive on ambiguity. Enoch eliminates it. By the time the text ends, there is nothing left to add. The record is complete, the system is clear, the outcome is scheduled. What remains is response. Each generation that encounters Enoch faces the same dilemma: accept alignment and live accordingly, or dismiss the structure and behave as if consequence is negotiable. The universe will not adjust to either choice. The Book of Enoch does not claim to be comforting. It claims to be accurate. It does not offer escape from reality. It offers explanation of it. In that sense, its final message is simple and relentless. The world is not waiting to be interpreted. It is already ordered. Judgment is not coming because chaos reigns. It is coming because order does. And once that truth is understood, the ancient text that was buried, excluded, and forgotten no longer feels obscure. It feels inevitable. Not because it demands attention, but because it explains what attention has been avoiding all along. The Book of Enoch ends where it began, not with mystery, but with exposure. The veil is lifted, the structure stands revealed, and humanity is left with the only question that has ever mattered in such a universe. Not what do you believe, but how do you live within what already is.